Everyone watched her walk into the luxurious restaurant, drenched, barefoot, and trembling. She didn't steal. She didn't beg for money. She only whispered, "May I have your leftovers, sir?" The room went silent. But when the cold-hearted millionaire looked into her eyes, something unexplainable happened. He didn't recognize her, but somehow she awakened a part of him, long buried in grief. What followed was no ordinary act of kindness. It was the beginning of a miracle no one saw coming. The rain didn't just fall, it crashed, as though heaven had broken a dam over the streets of Lagos. Cars honked. Street vendors scrambled for tarps. But no one noticed the girl in the corner of the restaurant window, pressing her forehead to the glass. She had no umbrella, no coat. Just a faded purple dress soaked at the edges and a pair of flip-flops that slapped against her cold feet every time she moved. Her hair clung to her forehead. Her arms folded tightly across her chest. But her eyes, those large, desperate eyes, were glued to one man sitting at table 9. The man's suit alone could feed her family for a month. Navy blue, cleanly tailored, without a single crease or stain. His wristwatch was a Rolex, the gold catching the soft lighting above like a sun in miniature. He didn't speak, just ate slowly. Grilled sea bass with wild rice, lemon-glazed vegetables, and a bottle of red wine that cost more than her family had seen in a year. A waiter in black and white approached his table. "Would you like me to box the rest, sir?" The man leaned back slightly, wiping his lips with a cloth napkin. "No," he said casually. "Leave it." That was her chance. She took a deep breath. Her fingers trembled. The wet fabric clung to her knees as she stepped inside. A few heads turned. The hostess wrinkled her nose. The guards by the door rose, unsure whether to stop her. She walked past them. "Straight to table 9. He looked up. She froze. The man, Sir Kenneth Obiora, tech millionaire, venture capitalist, media darling, was not what she expected. His eyes were tired, not cruel, not arrogant, just tired, like someone who had seen too much of something he couldn't explain. She opened her mouth and closed it. He raised an eyebrow, sipping the last of his wine. "May I," she said finally, her voice no louder than a whisper, "may I have your leftovers, sir?" Silence. The air seemed to freeze. A table of businessmen nearby chuckled. A waitress gasped. One older woman muttered something under her breath and turned away. But Kenneth didn't move. He looked at her. Really looked. His eyes searched her face. Her cheeks flushed from embarrassment. Her hair matted from the rain. The way she tried to stand tall even when everything about her was shaking. And then something happened. A flicker. A breath. A shift. His hand slowly pushed the plate toward her. But he didn't look away. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, surprised he'd even ask. Most people never cared to know. "Nina," she said. "Nina Okiki." "Sit," he said, motioning to the chair across from him. She looked behind her, unsure if this was a trap or a joke. "I don't bite," he added softly. Nina sat. The seat was warm. The food smelled heavenly. Her stomach twisted painfully, but she didn't dare touch anything yet. Not until she was sure this wasn't a dream. Kenneth didn't speak. He just watched her for a moment, then signaled the waiter. "Get her a fresh plate and a drink. She's dining with me." The waiter blinked. "Sir? You heard me?" Nina's eyes widened. "No, please, I didn't mean—" He raised a hand gently. "Eat, Nina." The food was better than anything she had ever tasted. Every bite melted on her tongue like a promise kept. She tried not to devour it, but hunger had no manners. Kenneth said nothing for a long time. He just watched. And then he asked the question that undid her. "How long have you been hungry?" Nina dropped her fork. She didn't know whether to lie or cry. "Since yesterday," she said quietly. "But it's not just me. My brother, he's 7. He hasn't had anything but water since morning." Kenneth's jaw clenched. He took a breath. "Where's your mother?" "Dead." "Your father?" "Gone. Left us after Mama died. I've been trying to find cleaning jobs, selling sachet water. Sometimes I braid hair at the market. But with the rain, nobody wants to sit. So, I came here. I wasn't going to steal. I just hoped—" Her voice broke. He didn't speak. For a long time, all Nina heard was the soft hum of music, clinking glasses, and the ache in her heart that had no name. Finally, Kenneth reached into his wallet and pulled out a card. "Come to this address tomorrow," he said. 8 a.m. sharp. Don't be late." Nina took the card with the shaking fingers. It had a logo, a stylized K and O, followed by an address in Victoria Island. "What is it?" she asked. "My office." Her brows furrowed. "Why would I come to your office?" He didn't answer directly. "Because sometimes," he said, "God hides answers in places you're afraid to walk into." Then he stood. And just like that, he was gone. Nina sat there for several minutes, holding the card like a lifeline, unsure if the evening had even happened. The waiter approached, clearing dishes. "Lucky girl," he muttered, shaking his head. But Nina didn't feel lucky. She felt seen. It had been so long since anyone looked at her like she mattered, since anyone spoke to her like she was more than a shadow. And Kenneth Obiora, millionaire, businessman, mystery, had done just that. She left the restaurant in silence. But inside her, something had awakened. Hope. Even if it was just a flicker. Even if it vanished by morning. The next day, Nina woke before the sun. She washed her face in the basin behind their compound, tied her best scarf over her hair, and wore the only clean clothes she had. A yellow blouse and jeans that were just a little too short. She fed her brother the last packet of biscuits someone had given them, kissed his forehead, and told the neighbor to watch him for a few hours. Then she walked. 2 hours in the heat and fumes, with dust in her sandals and sweat down her spine. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. The address led her to a towering glass building, guarded by men in dark suits and earpieces. She stepped inside. Cold air, white floors, a giant chandelier spinning slowly above. The receptionist blinked at her. "Yes? I'm here to see Mr. Kenneth Obiora. He gave me this." She handed over the card. The woman looked skeptical. She typed something, frowned, and picked up a phone. 2 minutes later, a tall man in a gray suit appeared. "Nina Okiki?" "Yes." "Come with me." She followed him into an elevator that shot up to the 15th floor. The doors opened to a wide room with floor-to-ceiling windows, shelves lined with awards, and a large desk near the center. Behind it sat Kenneth. He looked up, and for a moment, he just stared at her, like he was trying to solve a puzzle that only made sense when she was near. "You came," he said. "Yes," Nina replied. "You told me to." He nodded. Then he stood. "Nina," he said, walking toward her slowly, "I don't know who you are. I don't know why you looked at me that way last night. But when I did, something in me changed." Nina didn't understand. He sat down on the couch and motioned for her to do the same. 2 years ago, he began, I lost someone. My daughter. Her name was Adana. She would have been your age. She had the same eyes, the same spirit. Nina's breath caught. She died from a heart condition. One we caught too late. I couldn't save her. He paused. Since then, I've been Alive but not living. Successful but empty. Then he looked at her again. But when I saw you standing there, begging not for money, not for pity, but just for what someone else didn't want, I felt something I haven't felt in a long time. Nina's eyes brimmed. I'm not trying to replace her, he said. I know that's impossible. But maybe you were sent to help me feel again. Nina couldn't speak. Her heart was too full. And then quietly he added, would you let me help you, Nina? Feed you, teach you, take care of your brother, just let me give what I have. She nodded, too overwhelmed to find words. And in that moment, without fanfare or fireworks, a miracle began. Nina didn't know what to say. Her mouth opened slightly, but her voice had gone missing. Kenneth Obiora sat across from her in the kind of office she had only ever seen in movies. Glass walls, marble floors, a view of the city that made the traffic below look like toy cars. But it was the way he looked at her now that made her chest ache. Not with fear, but something far deeper. I don't understand, she said quietly. Why me? Kenneth leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. I don't either, he admitted. All I know is that I haven't felt anything since Adana died. Until last night. You didn't just ask for food. You made me remember how it feels to care. Nina stared at the edge of the table, her heart pounding. He continued. Let me help you. Let me help your brother. No conditions, no expectations. She looked up sharply. People don't just help without wanting something. I'm not people, he said without pride, just truth. A long silence followed. Nina finally asked, what would I have to do? Let me place you in school, somewhere safe. Bring your brother too. I have space. Nina blinked. Space? He nodded. A house. More rooms than I can count. And none of them feel like home anymore. Her throat tightened. I'm not asking you to trust me yet, he said softly. Just give me one day. Let me show you. Nina's lips quivered, but she nodded. Okay. That evening, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the front of her compound. Kenneth wasn't inside, just his driver, a man named Desmond, with kind eyes and a deep voice. Nina held her brother's hand tightly. Are you sure we can go? She whispered. The little boy looked up at her with sleepy eyes and a snot-streaked nose. Will they give us food? She nodded. Then let's go. They climbed in. No one in the compound dared speak to them, but everyone watched. As the car pulled away, Nina saw one neighbor whispering furiously to another, eyes wide. It was a long drive. As they crossed the bridge and entered the island, the roads grew smoother, the buildings taller, the air cleaner. And then they turned into a private estate. Security waved them through as if they already belonged. The house was more like a palace. White stone, wide steps, a fountain shaped like a swan in the driveway, lights glowing like golden stars along the path. Nina gripped her brother's hand tighter. A woman met them at the door, tall, in her 40s, with short, natural hair and a calm face. You must be Nina, she said, smiling gently. And this young man? My brother, Nina said. David. The woman knelt in front of him. Hi, David. I'm Auntie Vera. You hungry? David nodded quickly. Vera led them inside. Marble floors, huge windows, smell of cinnamon and fresh bread. Nina's eyes darted from the paintings on the wall to the high ceiling with a chandelier shaped like a tree. Is this really a house? She whispered. It is, Vera replied with a knowing smile, though it's been quiet for far too long. They were shown to a guest room, larger than the entire room she and David shared back home. There were 2 beds, 2 soft pillows each, A bathroom with a mirror so clean it looked like magic. Dinner was quiet but warm. Vera sat with them at the kitchen island while the chef, a man named Tunde, served jollof rice, grilled chicken, and steamed plantains. David ate like he hadn't in days. Nina tried to eat slower, but every bite felt like safety. Kenneth didn't join him. He prefers to eat alone, Vera explained, still grieving. Later that night, as Nina tucked David into the softest bed he had ever touched, he whispered, "Do you think we can stay forever?" Nina paused. "I don't know," she said truthfully. "But for now, we're safe." She sat by the window for a long time after he slept, watching the garden lights blink like stars. She didn't know if this was real, if it would last, but for the first time in years, she didn't fall asleep hungry. The next morning, Kenneth appeared at the breakfast table. He wore a simple white shirt and dark jeans. No suit, no Rolex. He greeted them with a small nod. "Did you sleep well?" David nodded happily, a spoonful of pap in his hand. Nina answered softly, "Yes, thank you." Kenneth sat down but didn't eat. "I've arranged for both of you to be enrolled in a private school nearby," he said. "Uniforms, books, transportation, all covered. There's a doctor coming to examine you both this afternoon, just to make sure you're healthy." Nina lowered her eyes. She hated being looked at like a charity case. Kenneth must have noticed. "This isn't pity," he said. "This is redemption, for me." She looked up. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "My daughter died because I was too late. I ignored signs, trusted the wrong doctors, thought my money could fix anything. By the time I paid attention, it was too late. Silence. She died in that room upstairs, alone. I wasn't there." Nina's chest squeezed. He continued, voice breaking slightly. "Since then, I've built companies, made millions. But none of it brings her back. None of it makes me feel human, until now." He looked at David, then at her. "You make me feel again, Nina, like I've been given one last chance to be useful." She nodded slowly, but her heart was cautious. 1 week turned into 2. David began to laugh again. He made friends, learned to spell his name. His cheeks grew rounder. Nina, however, struggled more. The house was beautiful, but she still flinched when someone raised their voice. She kept her old clothes in a plastic bag at the back of the wardrobe, just in case they were asked to leave suddenly. One evening she stood outside by the garden. The moon was full. The night air smelled like jasmine. Kenneth stepped out of the shadows. "You okay?" he asked. She shrugged. "I keep waiting for it to end, for you to tell us to go." "I won't." "You don't know me. I'm just a girl who asked for food. You're more than that." She didn't believe him. He added, "When Adana died, I prayed for a second chance. Not to replace her, just to love again. And when I saw you, I didn't see a beggar. I saw someone God hadn't forgotten." Nina's throat tightened. She turned her face away. "I don't know how to live like this," she whispered. "I don't know how to belong here." He walked over and sat beside her on the garden bench. "Neither do I," he said. They sat in silence, 2 broken souls trying to understand why Grace had touched them. One evening, about a month after their first meeting, Nina stood in the hallway outside the locked room upstairs. Vera found her there. "You want to see it?" she asked gently. Nina nodded. Vera unlocked the door. It was a child's room. Soft pink walls, a canopy bed. Stuffed animals lined neatly. Drawings framed on the wall. On the desk, a faded notebook with the name Adana written perfect cursive. Nina walked in slowly. Every step felt like trespassing. But nothing about the room felt angry. It felt like waiting. Vera whispered, He hasn't touched anything in 2 years. He couldn't. Nina sat on the edge of the bed, ran her fingers along the bedpost. Then she opened the notebook. The last page read, "Dear Daddy, I hope you come home soon. I miss our garden talks. Love, Adana." Tears stung Nina's eyes. She closed the notebook gently and stood. When she turned, Kenneth was standing in the doorway. He didn't speak. His face was unreadable. But his eyes, they were wet. Nina crossed the room. She didn't say anything. She just reached for his hand, and he didn't pull away. They stood there, in the middle of a memory, two strangers somehow bound by grief, grace, and the quiet miracle of presence. That night, as Nina drifted to sleep, a thought occurred to her. Maybe this wasn't just Kenneth's second chance. Maybe it was hers, too. Rain fell gently on the glass windows that morning. The sky was gray, and the sound of the droplets tapping against the panes filled the quiet house with a strange calm. Nina stood by the balcony of her new room, watching the drizzle. She could hear David's laughter somewhere downstairs. He had grown so comfortable here, so free. It made her heart ache in ways she didn't yet understand. There was peace now, but inside her, fear still lived like a shadow, always ready to whisper that none of this would last. She had not spoken to Kenneth much in the past week. He had gone on a business trip to Abuja and returned late last night. Vera said he barely slept and had been up walking around the house all morning. Nina turned from the balcony and walked toward her wardrobe. She wanted to change into her school uniform, but something caught her eye. A dress. A simple powder blue dress that hadn't been there yesterday. It was long, flowing, with soft ruffles on the sleeve. It looked new. No tags, no price. Just waiting. Nina didn't touch it. She closed the wardrobe and stepped back. Downstairs, Vera was already setting the table. David sat on the stool, swinging his legs and grinning from ear to ear. "Good morning, big sis," he called. "Good morning," Nina said, forcing a smile. Vera looked up from the pot of porridge. "Did you see the dress?" Nina hesitated. "Yes. It was Dana's. He kept it in storage. Said he didn't know why he hadn't given it away. Said maybe one day someone would wear it who needed it more." Nina frowned slightly. "I'm not her." Vera dried her hands and walked over to her gently. "We know that, child. No one's asking you to be. But maybe wearing something that once made a little girl feel beautiful could remind you that you are, too." Nina looked away. Later that afternoon, Kenneth appeared at the study door while she was helping David with his spelling homework. "May I speak with you?" he asked. Nina nodded and followed him into the hallway. He led her into the music room, a space filled with silence, untouched instruments, and dust-covered dreams. "I heard you saw the dress," he said. She crossed her arms. "It's too much." Kenneth sat on the edge of the piano bench. That dress belonged to a little girl who loved clouds, fairy tales, and lemon ice cream. She wore it on her 8th birthday. It was the last birthday I celebrated with her. Nina's face softened. "I'm not trying to replace her, Nina. I know how that feels, to be replaced, forgotten. You've probably felt invisible your whole life. I'm not here to fix you. But if something I give makes you feel safe or even a little bit loved, then I'll keep giving." She stayed quiet for a moment. "Love doesn't feel safe," she finally said. "It leaves. It forgets. Or worse, it uses you." Kenneth stood and walked to the window. "I used to believe the same," he said, "until a girl in tattered clothes walked into a 5-star restaurant and reminded me that miracles still exist." Nina's eyes welled up with tears. She hated how easily he spoke to her heart. "I'll wear it," she whispered. Kenneth turned. "You don't have to." I want to, she said. For her and for me. That weekend, Vera organized a small outing to the children's library in town. David had never seen so many books in one place. He ran from shelf to shelf, eyes wide, hands covered in crayons from the art corner. Nina wore the dress. It was a perfect fit. She stood by the window of the reading room, looking out at the street. Her hair was tied back. For the first time, she looked like a girl who belonged to someone. Not a shadow, not a beggar, just Nina. A woman approached her, smiling. Your daughter is very bright, she said, gesturing to David. Nina blinked. He's my brother. Oh, sorry, I assumed. You two look so close. Nina smiled awkwardly. It was the first time anyone had mistaken her for someone important in someone else's life. On the drive home, David fell asleep in her arms. Kenneth was waiting at the gate. He smiled when he saw her step out of the car. You wore the dress. She nodded. I'm still afraid, she admitted. Me too, he replied. He took David from her arms and carried the boy gently upstairs to his room. Nina stood in the hallway, staring after them. She didn't realize her hands were shaking until Vera handed her a cup of tea. Sometimes, Vera said quietly, when people have both lost too much, the only language they understand is silence and presence. The next few days passed in quiet waves. Nina began to help in the kitchen, not because anyone asked her to, but because it made her feel useful. She started waking earlier, walking around the garden before sunrise. The house was beginning to feel less like a dream and more like a place her soul could rest. One night she found Kenneth in the garden, sitting on the bench alone. Couldn't sleep, she asked. He shook his head. Dreams allow. She sat beside him. After a pause, she asked, Why me? There must be 1,000 girls like me out there. There are, he said. But only one of them looked at me with eyes that didn't ask for anything except what I had thrown away. She looked at him. I didn't throw you away, he added quickly. But I'd thrown away kindness, compassion, faith, until you picked it up off the floor and reminded me what it looked like. She didn't know what to say. Some nights, he continued, voice lower now, I sit here and try to imagine what life would have been like if Adana had lived. She'd be 10 by now, maybe taller than you, maybe not. Nina watched his eyes, not his lips. I think she would have liked you, he said. Why? Because you speak the truth, even when it's hard, and you love your brother, like your life depends on it. Nina turned away, blinking fast. He noticed. Do you miss your parents? She nodded slowly. My father died when I was 10. My mother followed months later. She didn't die physically right away, but she died emotionally. Left me and David to survive on our own. Silence fell between them. I used to believe God had abandoned us, she whispered. Now I wonder if he was just waiting. For what? For the day I would walk into that restaurant. For the day someone would actually see me. Kenneth stared at her. I see you now, he said. She stood quickly, suddenly uncomfortable with the weight of the moment. I should check on David, she mumbled. Nina. She paused. Thank you for seeing me too, he said softly. She nodded, then walked away before her tears could betray her. A week later, a letter arrived. Nina opened it with trembling fingers. It was from a charity organization. She had written to them months ago, begging for medical help for David. They had finally responded. The letter said the window for assistance had passed. They had no funds to offer. No help would be coming. She sat on the edge of the bed, holding the paper like it was made of glass. Kenneth found her there an hour later. He read the letter silently. Then he looked at her. "What does David need?" "His lungs," she said. "Sometimes he wheezes in his sleep, gets fevers. Doctors said it could be long-term asthma or early signs of something worse. But no one ever had time to check." Kenneth nodded. "Let's go to the hospital tomorrow." She shook her head. "It's expensive." He reached out and touched her hand. "You are worth more than money. So is he." Nina looked at him, searching for the lie in his eyes. But there was none. The next day, tests were done, blood drawn, x-rays taken. David had a mild respiratory condition that needed long-term management, but was fully treatable. The doctor said if they had waited another year, things could have turned irreversible. That night, Nina stood in the hallway staring at her reflection in the mirror. She barely recognized the girl staring back. Her eyes were stronger, her shoulders less tense. Her hands no longer shook when someone spoke kindly to her. Kenneth walked up behind her. "You saved him," she whispered. "No," he said. "You did. I just gave you the tools. You were always the fighter." For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe that maybe she could be more than just a survivor. Maybe she could be whole. If you've made it this far into the story, it means something about it has touched you, and that truly means the world to us. Watching people connect deeply with our stories is what keeps us going. Your support, by liking, commenting, sharing, and especially subscribing, motivates us to create even more meaningful and emotional content for you. So if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button, leave a comment to share your thoughts, and give this video a like. Every action you take encourages us to keep bringing stories like this to life. Now, let's continue with our story. Nina awoke to the sound of her name being whispered. It was David standing by the doorway, his face pale. "What is it?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. There's a man in the sitting room," he said. "He's talking to Mr. Kenneth. They're shouting." Nina threw on her robe and ran down the stairs, her heart thudding. She stopped just before the hallway and listened. "I told you to stay away from her," a deep voice growled. Kenneth's voice was firm. "You don't get to show up here after all these years and act like you care. You think you can erase me? Hide her from the truth?" Nina stepped into the room. Both men turned toward her. The stranger was tall, dark-skinned, with hard eyes and a scar running down the left side of his jaw. Something about his face made Nina's stomach twist. He looked familiar. Too familiar. "Nina," Kenneth said, his voice suddenly gentle. "This is—" The man cut in. "I'm your uncle," he said. "Your mother's brother." Nina froze. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible. I don't have any family left." The man stepped closer. "You do. I'm Chuka. Your mother ran away from home when she was 18. She never told you about me because she didn't trust anyone anymore. But I've been looking for you, both of you." "Why now?" Nina asked, trembling. "I found out where you were when I saw your picture online. Someone posted a photo of this house. You were in the background. I recognize your eyes." Kenneth stepped between them. "She's safe here." Chuka scoffed. "Safe? With a man who carries ghosts in his eyes and secrets in his closet?" Nina looked at Kenneth. "What is he talking about?" Kenneth's face tightened. "He's trying to confuse you." "I'm trying to protect her," Chuka snapped. "You think you're her savior, but you're not. You're just a man trying to fix what he broke." "Enough," Nina said, her voice shaking. "I need to think." She turned and walked out of the room. The next few days were tense. Chuka stayed in town, calling daily, sending messages, asking to meet with her privately. Kenneth avoided her eyes, Vera was quiet. David was confused. Then one evening, while searching for a lost notebook in the study drawer, Nina found a hidden compartment. Inside it was a photograph. She pulled it out slowly. It was old, slightly faded. In it stood a woman who looked just like her, only older, holding a baby, smiling. Beside her stood Kenneth. Nina's breath caught. She flipped the photo over. Adana, 6 months old, me and Ijoma, Lagos, 2016. She dropped the picture. Ijoma. Her mother's name was Ijoma. Her hands trembled as she picked up the photo again. Her mind spun. Her mother, Kenneth, together. Why hadn't he said anything? She ran to Vera's room. "Tell me the truth," she said. "Who is Ijoma to Kenneth?" Vera's face went pale. "I didn't know you'd find that," she whispered. "Tell me." Vera sighed. Years ago, Kenneth had a brief relationship with a woman named Ijoma. He loved her, but she left without explanation. He tried to find her, but it was like she vanished. "Was she my mother?" Vera nodded slowly. "But Kenneth never knew she had a child." "No, not until you came into that restaurant. He didn't say anything at first, but after you left, he looked into your file. Then he saw your name, your full name. It was too much of a coincidence. Then he found an old photo online of your mother's grave. Same face, same smile. He broke down. Why didn't he tell me?" "Because he didn't know how. Because he's been carrying guilt for years." Nina staggered backward. So many pieces were falling into place. His sudden care, his gentle looks, the sadness when she spoke of her mother, the way he looked at David. She wasn't just a girl he rescued. She was his daughter. Later that night, Kenneth stood alone in the garden again. Nina walked up behind him, the photograph in her hand. "You lied to me," she said quietly. Kenneth didn't turn. "I wanted to tell you every day. But every time I opened my mouth, I remembered how I failed your mother." "Why did she leave you?" "She said I was too broken, too distant. I was already starting my business empire, pushing people away to chase success. She wanted a home. I offered a mansion, but no peace. I never knew she was pregnant. If I had, would it have made a difference?" He turned to her then. "Yes," he said. "Everything would have been different. You would have grown up in a warm bed with music in the mornings and stories every night, not sleeping in gutters, not begging for leftovers." Tears ran down her face. "And now?" she asked. "Now I wanted to give you what I failed to give her. A life, a father, a family." She stood frozen. "I'm not ready to call anyone a dad," she whispered. "I understand," he said. "But I can't hate you either," she added, "because I see how much you love David, how much you regret." Kenneth nodded. "Take your time." "I might need a long time. I'll wait." The next morning, Chuka called again. "I know what you found," he said, "and I know what Kenneth is hiding from you." "I already know," Nina replied coldly. "No," Chuka said. "You know what he's told you, but you don't know who really caused your mother's death." Nina's chest tightened. "What?" "Come meet me at the old train station on Alecchi Street. I'll show you everything." Nina didn't want to go, but something in Chuka's voice pulled her. She slipped out that evening unnoticed and took a bike to the station. It was abandoned. Rusted tracks, cracked benches. Chuka was waiting with a file in his hand. "What is that?" she asked. "Hospital records. From 2016. Your mother's cause of death wasn't natural. It was medical neglect." Nina's hands shook as she opened the file. "I don't understand." "She went to a private hospital in Lagos. She was bleeding. She was refused treatment because she couldn't pay up front. She died in the waiting room. Nina swallowed hard. Now look at the hospital name. She turned the page. Benedont Group Hospital. No, she whispered. That hospital is part of Kenneth's network. He owned it at the time. Nina staggered back. He didn't kill her himself, Chuka said. But his system did. His rules. His profit over people mentality. He never even knew. But that doesn't change the truth. Nina clutched the file to her chest. Everything blurred. She ran. She ran past the tracks, past the streetlights, past the confusion boiling in her head. When she reached the house, Kenneth was standing at the doorway. You went to see him, he said quietly. She dropped the file at his feet. He opened it slowly. He sat down on the floor, staring at the words. I never knew, he said, her voice hoarse. But it's your hospital, Nina cried. She died because of your policies. He nodded, eyes red. I built a world where people like your mother couldn't survive. And I've spent the last few years tearing that world apart, rebuilding every clinic, changing every policy. But I was too late. He looked up at her. I don't expect forgiveness. Nina stared at him. I don't have forgiveness to give, she whispered. Not yet. She turned and walked away. That night she couldn't sleep. David crawled into bed beside her. Are you sad? He asked. Yes. Is Mr. Kenneth still our friend? I don't know. David was quiet for a moment. Even if he did bad things before, he's good now, right? She looked into her brother's eyes. Yes, she said, he is. In the morning, Kenneth was gone. Vera handed her a note. It read, I'll stay away until you decide what you want. But I'll never stop being your father, not in my heart. Nina held the note for a long time. Then she walked to the closet and opened it. Inside, the blue dress still hung. She didn't wear it that day. Instead, she folded it gently and placed it in a small box. She wasn't ready to wear someone else's past. She wanted to start building her own. But deep inside, a miracle had already begun. The kind that doesn't shine loudly, but breathes quietly, healing what the world tried to break. Weeks passed. Life in the mansion grew quieter. Kenneth hadn't returned since the day he left. His absence hung over the house like a forgotten melody. Vera managed things with silent grace. David went back to school, and Nina was trying to piece herself together again. Some days she felt strong. Other days she felt like the broken little girl beneath the market stalls again, scraping the dust for food, praying for the rain to stop. The photo she found remained under her pillow, and every night before sleep she whispered to it, as if her mother could still hear. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but I'm trying. Her mother's face in the picture never answered, but the quiet helped. Then one day Vera handed her a parcel, no return name, no note. Nina opened it carefully. Inside was a delicate wooden box. She lifted the lid. Inside lay a gold chain, simple, elegant. Attached was a tiny pendant, a heart. Engraved on it were 2 letters. A.B., Adana Bennett. Her full name. Her breath caught. It was the first time she'd seen herself acknowledged without the ache of being a mistake. There was something else in the box, a folded letter. She opened it slowly. I don't want to force you to call me father. I don't even need your forgiveness yet. I just want you to know this. I see you now. I carry your mother's name like a scar, and I carry yours like a vow. Come to me only when your heart is ready, not before. Nina clutched the chain to her chest. That night she went to the garden and stood where Kenneth always stood, where the wind hummed like memory. She closed her eyes. "I still don't know if I can forgive you," she whispered, "but I want to learn how to." A sound made her turn. David was standing by the trees, his backpack in hand. "Where are you going?" she asked. "I want to see Mr. Kenneth," he said. "I miss him." Nina knelt beside him. "He misses you, too." David reached into his pocket and pulled out a small paper he had folded many times. On it was a drawing of their old life, the alley, the food lines, a stick figure version of Nina holding David's hand. "I want to give this to him," he said, "to remind him where we came from, so he'll never forget." Nina nodded, her throat tight. "Tomorrow," she said, "we'll go together." But tomorrow never came the way she expected. At dawn, a black car pulled into Mansion's driveway. A man in a black suit stepped out and handed Vera a file. She rushed to Nina's room. "It's Kenneth," she said breathlessly. "He's been arrested." "What?" "Late last night. Accusations from the past. Something to do with his first hospital, financial manipulation, negligence. They're reopening the investigation." Nina's knees gave way. "But he's been trying to fix everything," she whispered. "Sometimes the past catches up," Vera said softly. The next few hours were a blur. Nina watched news clips roll in. Kenneth being led into a courtroom, reporters shouting questions, lawyers arguing about whether old records had been tampered with to hide the deaths of unpaid patients, including her mother. Didn't make sense. He had changed. He had tried. But now he was drowning in the very system he built, and Nina couldn't breathe. She didn't know what to believe. Chuka called. "I told you he wasn't the hero." She hung up without replying. That night, she found David on the balcony, staring at the sky. "Is he bad now?" David asked. "I don't know," Nina whispered. "Maybe he was, maybe he is, but maybe he was trying to be good. I still want to give him my picture." "Then we will." 3 days later, Nina stood in a crowded courtroom, her hands cold. Kenneth looked different, tired, thinner, older. But when his eyes met hers, there was still something unshaken, that quiet hope. Nina wanted to run to him. But something held her back. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the truth. Maybe it was the storm between what she knew and what she felt. The judge adjourned the session. Kenneth was being held for further questioning. No bail yet. As guards led him away, Nina stepped forward and pressed David's folded drawing into his hand. "Don't forget," she whispered. "We came from nothing, but we became something." Kenneth's eyes filled. He couldn't speak. He simply nodded. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters swarmed. One pushed a mic to Nina's face. "Are you his daughter? Will you testify for or against him?" She said nothing. But in her chest, something stirred. Later that night, back at the mansion, she sat by the window. She opened the wooden box again, looked at the pendant, ran her fingers over the engraving. Adana Bennett. Her name. His name. Then her phone buzzed. A number she didn't recognize. She hesitated, then answered. "Is this Nina?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes." "I'm calling on behalf of a patient who recently arrived at Mercy Heights Mental Facility. He's listed you as next of kin." Nina frowned. "Who?" "Chuka Okafor." Her breath caught. "What happened?" "He was brought in after suffering a mental episode. Delusional paranoia, erratic behavior. He kept repeating that your father killed someone else. Someone named Ayo. We thought you should know." The line crackled. Nina stared into the darkness. Ayo? She'd never heard the name before. Did he say anything else? She asked quietly. The nurse hesitated. Only this. The fire wasn't an accident. She knew. She was going to tell. He silenced her. Click. The line went dead. Nina stood frozen. The photo of her mother burned behind her eyes. The fire? She remembered. Her mother's death certificate said complications from bleeding. But didn't her mother mention once, years ago, that she had barely escaped a house fire? Was that fire part of it? Was there more no one told her? Was Chuka hallucinating? Or had he just revealed a secret meant to stay buried? And if so, who was Ayo? The next morning, Nina woke up early and went to the study. She opened her mother's old purse, the one she'd kept all these years. Inside was an old envelope she'd never dared to open. She pulled it out now, unsealed it. And what she saw made her gasp. A photograph of her mother and another woman, both smiling. Behind them was a burnt-down building. On the back of the photo was a note. Ayo, thank you for hiding me when no one else would. The ink was faded, but the truth now glared at her like a ghost from the grave. Ayo wasn't just a name. Ayo was real. And maybe Kenneth wasn't the only one with secrets. The truth had not finished unraveling. The storm had only just begun. Nina held the photo tightly and whispered into the wind. The story isn't over. If you've watched to this point, it means the story touched something deep inside you. Maybe it was Nina's pain, David's innocence, or the shocking twist at the end. Whatever moment grabbed your heart, we'd love for you to subscribe to the channel. Your likes, comments, and shares motivate us to keep creating stories that matter, stories that stay with you long after they end. So if even one part of the story moved you, please hit that subscribe button. We have more coming, and trust me, it only gets deeper from here.